Good morning. Welcome to Boardroom Bites at 9. Our session for this morning is called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's how to master 3 types of leadership habits extraordinary CEOs possess. And our speaker this morning is Daphna Horowitz. Daphna, welcome and thank you for joining us today. Daphna is a CEO coach. She's worked with many clients around the globe to create some extraordinary and build future leaders in their businesses. So Daphna, very excited to have you with us this morning and to hear your insights. Before we start, I'm just going to run a quick poll just to get an idea of who's in the room this morning. So you should see on your screens a poll coming up. I'm going to give you a few seconds to complete that. I see there is still some members joining in on the numbers. And our question for today, just to gauge who's in the room, is, are you currently a CEO? Have you formerly been a CEO? Are you in the C-suite of executive management or executive directors? Are you an NED, a senior manager, or others? So I'm going to give you a few more seconds to just let everybody answer that. So that Daphna can just see who's in the room with regards to what we're going to talk to this morning. And okay, I think everybody's kind of done. Okay, a few more. I'm going to give it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to close that poll. I think we've got a good enough idea to see who's in the room, and I'm going to share the results. So it looks like we've got 23% that are NED, but if I add up our CEOs and our C-suite execs in the room, we're sitting at about 38. So at least a good third of us, Daphna, is in that executive stream. So I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to now give you control, Daphna, and I will see everyone again during the Q&A. And good luck and enjoy.
So good morning, everybody. I am super excited to be speaking to you today, and I'm excited to have a variety of roles in the room because there is something in this presentation for everyone, and we'll get stuck in and you'll see how it all comes together. So thank you for joining me and thank you for inviting me to speak. I really want to set the scene with my own story. And for that, I want to take you back about, and let me just make sure that my clicking is working here. 1 second. Oh. Okay, getting the logistics. So as I said, I'm starting with my own story, and I want to take you back about 9 years to August 2012. And this is where I embarked on one of the most difficult things I've done in my life, and that was to climb Kilimanjaro. And I have to say, as just a little bit of background, I started off my life being a completely non-sporty person. In fact, I would do anything to avoid any type of exercise especially when I was a child and we had to have those PT classes at school. And I was much more interested in reading books and solving maths problems. Okay, I became an actuary. So for me, maths was a big thing. Exercise was really not something I enjoyed doing. And I was a little bit of a nerd, if I admit that. So at the same time, I always love a challenge. And when the opportunity came up for me to take this trip up Kilimanjaro, I thought, yes, I'm going to do it, because it was really an opportunity for me to do something physical that was hard and challenge myself, to show myself that I can, together with, of course, being in nature, which I absolutely love, in somewhere unspoilt and beautiful, and it really, really was. So you can imagine, for a trip like this, whether you're sporty or not, there's a lot of preparation involved. You need skill, you need training, you need gear, you need a good support team, and you have to have everything set up before you start so that you set yourself up for the very best success to reach the summit. And even with all the planning and all the training and all the knowledge and the gear and everything, reaching the summit almost didn't happen for me. It got me up the mountain to 1,000 meters short of the summit. It's exactly at this point, and it was just before sunrise, so it was pitch black. And this was the point that I could not take another step. I was exhausted. I was freezing cold. I couldn't breathe. I was literally falling asleep as I was walking. My hands, my fingers were totally frozen, couldn't even move them. And this is the point where I thought, okay, my dream is actually fading in front of me. It's not going to happen for me. So then what happened? As I was sitting there, because I took a break, sat on a rock, I was sitting there frozen and exhausted. My guide came up to me and he started talking to me. And he just said to me, just do one more step. You've worked hard. You're almost there. You've put in so much effort. I know how much you want this. I know how difficult it is. I'm here. Just think of one more step. Don't think of the whole journey that's still left. Just think of the next step that you have to take. And at that point, it was like a switch turned on in my mind. And I got up and I took one more step, and then I took one more, and I took one more.
Sorry, Daphne.
Yes.
There seems to be some static feedback coming from your mic somehow. Are you moving something next to you?
Oh, could be. Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. Okay, good. So at this critical point where I couldn't move, my guide was speaking to me, and that his words made me realize that I was not alone and that I can do it just one step at a time. And my focus shifted from I can't do this to maybe I can. And then I reached the summit. Okay, hold on a sec. Oh. Right, we'll get this right. Okay, so I reached the summit and I was exhausted and elated at the same time. And the truth is that at this moment, I realized that all the things that got me to this point, to that point, 1,000 meters below the summit where I almost didn't make it, all the things that got me to that point were not enough to actually take me that last distance up to the summit. And then I realized that it was the external, the preparation sets you up for success. But to get that final distance or that extra mileage, it was something inside me that needed to shift. Something in me needed to change direction, change focus, and then give me that leap upwards to get that final distance to the summit. And this is when, you know, Edmund Hillary's words, he was the first person to climb Everest. It really, really connected with me in that moment, because that's when I really understood we are not conquering any mountain here. We are actually conquering ourselves, working with ourselves, our mindset, our inner being, and that's what takes us that extra step further. And really, this is the idea behind what I want to share with you today, because the whole concept of what got you here won't get you there is really relating to what I call the leadership gap. And this is where we've taken a lot of steps. We've worked hard. We've got knowledge. We've got experience. We've got expertise. We've got a team. We've got everything we need that has got us to a level of success. So whether we CEO, senior leaders, or any of these, whatever position we are in at the moment, we've worked really hard to get there. And at every step along the journey, we reach a point where we know something more is required to get to that next level further, to traverse the leadership gap, because at a certain point, it's not just about your knowledge and your skills and everything that you've accumulated. Of course, that's what gets you to this point, and it will stand you in good stead forever. But what you need now is a new set of skills. You need to understand more about yourself, more about how you show up, how you behave, how you lead people around you, how you create a big vision. And those are the leadership skills that we now need to work on in order to really take that next leap forward into the future and into the vision. So for the rest of our time together, this is what I'm going to be sharing with you. So we've spoken a bit about the leadership gap, and we'll speak some more. We'll also talk a little bit about the life of a CEO and what are the painful problems that CEOs face. What are some of the common myths that hold them back? And then we'll look at how do we build our habits and behaviors to really set us up for consistent success from level to level as we continue to progress and develop on our life and leadership journey. And also, how do we make these habits stick so that we can really revolutionize the way that we lead? And what I want to say here as well is we've got a variety of roles that you're sitting in at the moment in our audience. And it's really important that, first of all, anyone in a senior leadership, whatever applies to CEOs applies to anyone who is in a leadership position. And that's whatever leadership position you're in, or as an NED, supporting CEOs and really helping them grow and work through some of their challenges. It's really useful to understand the context that CEOs operate in, and what are they facing in terms of the painful problems and the mindsets that they really need to work with in order to take themselves and their business that level further. So let's start with the painful problem number 1 for CEOs. So let's see if you can relate to this. So this is when you're feeling frustrated with your team's speed of execution that doesn't quite match your own. So you're constantly chasing deliverables or firefighting a crisis. And something that comes under this painful problem as well is often that CEOs feel like they're 100 steps ahead of their team. They're thinking quicker, they're moving quicker, and their team is always trying to catch up, and they're working and fighting very hard to get their team to kind of keep up the pace with them. And that is one of the big frustrations that I've found with CEOs. So what I want to ask you now, I know we've got a lot of people in the room, so I love to use the chat for interaction. If you can relate to this problem, or if you've seen this problem with someone that you work with, please do just type 1 in the chat, and we'll see. Let's see that. Okay, brilliant. Lovely to see that. So you can relate. Excellent. We know this painful problem, and it really is painful. Okay, keep those ones coming. You know what? Also, I'm actually going to pause here for a moment and say, if you have an insight, if you think of something that, yes, I agree, or no, this sounds crazy, or what a surprise, please share in the chat, because when we're doing virtual presentations and we're not in the room together, the way to get energy into the room is through using the chat. So share your insights, share your questions, your surprise, whatever it is that you want to know. And that's how we can feel that we're in this room together. So great. Thanks for those ones coming in. So here's CEO painful problem number 2. And let's see if you can relate to this one. And this is really about being tired of receiving negative feedback about your leadership style and approach. And the problem here is that because we are so focused on results and deliverables that we don't have the time to really pay attention to how we're leading people. What do our people need? We are so stretched and so stressed in terms of what we need to do and the performance and the results that we need to show, that really taking the time to really look at what our people need and how we spend time in conversation and really supporting all of that just sometimes seems like too much. And the thing here is that actually you're lucky if you are receiving negative feedback, because many times you just hear rumors through the gossip mill, or you might not even know because you're often surrounded by people who are not going to be that honest with you about how they're relating to you. So once again here, please do say, write in the number 2 in the chat if you relate to this, and if you know someone who you've definitely seen this happening. This is definitely great. And I see the comments. I'm going to go through them later, but good. Keep those. I'm so glad to see the 2s, because that means we're on the same page and we can actually relate to what I'm talking about. Brilliant. Let's go to CEO painful problem number 3, and let's see if you can relate to this one. So I think we've all heard the saying, it's lonely at the top. And this is really because we are holding responsibility for absolutely everything. We as CEOs are the coordinators of everything that's going on. We feel like we need to show that we've got it all together. We know what we're doing, even though sometimes we really feel like we don't. There's imposter syndrome coming in here. Oh, and you've got it already, number 3, exactly. If you can relate, type 3 into the chat, and I can see those 3s coming in. Absolutely. And what happens here is that you don't really have anyone to really be able to talk to. Just let go and share your concerns and share your frustrations, because you feel like you've got to hold it all together. And your team, the gap between you and your team just seems too wide to close. At the same time, you really want your team to be close enough to you to share their frustrations and their problems and their challenges. And that is really something that is very challenging to navigate for a CEO. So that's painful problem number 3, and I see all those 3s coming in, so that's really awesome. So now, how do we know this? Really, We know this because we've seen this. I've worked with many, many CEOs over the years, and these are the themes that have emerged from our work with my clients. And I'd like to share Ben's story just to put it in a little bit of perspective. Now, Ben was a CEO that I worked with, super talented guy, very, very clever. In fact, an actuary. So in my previous life, I was an actuary, and we didn't actually know each other then, but he came to me in my work as a CEO coach. He started a startup using his incredible talents, incredible intellectual and analytical ability. He got funding secured. He got an awesome team in place, but he got stuck at a certain point where he felt like he was doing all the things that had brought him success in the past, but it didn't help him to traverse that next level of growth that he needed. His growth was just stalling. Everything was hard work for him. He had taken it all on himself. His team wasn't stepping up enough, and he wasn't seeing the breakthrough results that he needed. So what happened to Ben? Actually, this is when he experienced the leadership gap, full on, because he had done everything that he needed to get him going and get him to this level of success, which was brilliant, really, really brilliant. And then he was stalled. And this is that concept of what got you here won't get you there, because the skills and knowledge and experience are great, but now you need something different. He needed something more. And often that sits in mindset. So what happened? After we had actually worked together and established a leadership habit roadmap for him to follow, what are the things that he needed to work on in terms of his style, in terms of his bringing people on board and actually being willing to delegate some of the leadership and bring people in and understand that he was not alone in this thing, he really managed to shift the results of his business and his team, and he is doing fabulous. He really, really got to that level of growth, which is just so rewarding to see. And what he said in his own words, it's all about structuring my thinking, changing small behaviors, and cultivating the habits that work for me. And I think that's really important to say, because it's not a major personality shift that you have to go through. It's not a major overhaul of things that, how can I take this on? It's just not me. It's actually understanding, looking deeply into what are the things that are holding you back in terms of mindset and behavior, and tweaking those and building habits consistently, practicing so that you start to operate in a different way. And when you shift your mindset in that way, your results shift as well. So when Ben got clear on what he wanted and built a roadmap of the leadership habits he needed to consistently lead himself, his team, and his business to success, he began to see shifts in his team performance and business results. And it was really rewarding to see that. Okay, so there's a mindset shift that needs to happen here. And this is really important. So this is that part of digging deep inside and really looking at yourself and understanding what needs to change. Because if I change something in the way I operate, then the world around me is going to change as well. And that is truly our superpower. So when we are able to look inside, we can then start to close that leadership gap that I was talking about. And some of you might have heard of the concept of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Great book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And really what this talks about is that as leaders, we really need to build a growth mindset. Now, what does a growth mindset mean? A growth mindset is all about being willing to learn, being willing to not know everything, being willing to bring people in, and even hire people who know more than you. Because as CEO or as a leader, you're starting to hold much more of a coordination role than a role of, I need to be the expert or really good at this one thing that I'm good at. As you climb the ladder of success and you take on more and more responsibility and bigger teams and bigger areas of responsibility, you can't be good at everything. And this is when you need to let go of that notion that you need to have all the answers and you need to be good at everything. And this is where the growth mindset comes in, because the growth mindset says, I'm willing to make mistakes. I'm willing to try new things. I'm willing to bring people in and trust them and see and try and work with what's there and, not always know everything. Whereas a fixed mindset is the one that's going to hold on to all the things that we've done in the past because they've worked, and this is exactly the paradox here. Everything you've done in the past has worked for you. And many leaders often feel like, okay, if we just keep doing this, it's like, this is the work, the formula of success. This is the formula that works. If I just keep doing the same things that I've always done, I'll continue to be successful. And unfortunately, that's not true. And this is where we need to let go. There's a fixed mindset sitting here saying, I want to go with a safe, with a known, with a secure, with a certain. I know this, and I'm going to hold on to this. Feels safer, but it doesn't allow for growth. So what I'd like to share with you today is that I've got this quiz. It's all about, if you want to find out if you have a growth or a fixed mindset, feel free to go to this link. And I know Vusi will put it in the chat as well, and do the test and see, where does your mindset seem to sit? Is it with a growth or a fixed mindset? Now, just a word of warning here. People, first thing I'll say is that it is situational. So you can have a growth mindset in certain situations and a fixed mindset in other situations. So that can happen. And then people often get a fright when they do this mindset quiz. So the results go nowhere, they stay with you. I don't keep them anywhere. So it really is for you to learn and grow from. But I do have to say, people get surprised because they often think they have a growth mindset, and this quiz highlights area where they didn't even realize they have a fixed mindset. And that's the whole thing, because a fixed mindset is a little bit of a blind spot. So you need to have something or someone point it out to you. So go ahead, do that quiz. If you have any questions or you want to share your results with me, I'm always open. I answer every single email I receive. So do go ahead, ask me your questions, but feel free to take the quiz. It really is an interesting one. Okay, so now we know that we are talking about mindset and how important it is to work on our mindset to really be able to move in our journey as CEO. And the journey that we're taking is really from high achiever, being the successful top performer, the person who knows what they're doing, who's got the experience, to extraordinary leader. Now, it doesn't mean that we're leaving any of our knowledge or expertise or experience behind. Of course, we bring that with us, but we need to augment our set of skills with a whole new set of skills that will take us to that next level of really, really knowing how to lead in a different way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at 3 common myths that we often hold relating to the CEO role. And we want to know what those are so that we can really shift them, because those are the myths that sometimes hold us back. So I'm going to share these myths with you, and we're going to do the same thing. There's 3 myths. And if you can relate, just type the number. We'll start with number 1 and type 1 in the chat and let me know if you can relate to this myth, or if you've heard it before from someone, or maybe even if you've thought it yourself. So here's the first one. So the first one is that being a great CEO is about performance and targets. And as long as I'm hitting my targets, then everything is absolutely fine. And what we do know, so quickly, one, if anybody has heard this, if anybody knows, and if anybody can relate, just hit that number 1, and I see those coming through. Thank you. And the truth is that it's a little bit of a different picture. The truth is that CEOs get hired for results and fired for style. Now, this is really interesting because results are created and powerful decisions are made through people and by people. And people have feelings, hopes, dreams, desires, and motivations, and they're really, really important to them. So your leadership style is going to determine how people connect to you and want to be led by you. So Lerata, I see, says that doesn't relate to myth 1, and that's really great. Awesome. I think because it does mean that you understand that there's more to being a CEO than just focusing and pushing for results. But I will say it's important to have an awareness that some people do have that way of thinking. Okay, even some may not admit it, but yeah, for those who don't resonate, think about if you are working with other leaders, if you have people in your team who have that view, then how do you work with them and how do you bridge those gaps? You know, really want to, it brings to mind for me the story of Mike, who I actually worked with his team. He was a CEO that was one of these that really held this myth very, very strongly. And he pushed his team to endless limits just to get results, didn't really care about his style. And in fact, he had a very abrupt, even bullying style, very, very difficult to work with. But he was talented and he was noticed in the market. And then, yeah, and here we have Charles saying challenge when your board is so focused on results. And that's also very, very true. So he was noticed in the market and he was headhunted for another organization. And he was actually moved because of the results that he had managed to create for the company that he was in. He left the business, went into the new one, And then within 6 months, he was actually asked to leave his CEO role because he didn't fit with the culture. And very quick, this was a business that wasn't going to forgive a star performer who didn't have a good leadership style. And unfortunately, I see that in many, many businesses. Star performer, results are met, metrics are met, keep them going because they're doing so well for the business. And this is where fine line that we had to tread, and I'm going to say for our board as well, you know, how do you do this? You see a top performer as a board member, as an NED, are you going to call it, or are you going to just let it happen because the business is doing well? So in this particular myth, how we deal with it is really by working on our self-leadership habits. It's about creating awareness. It's about understanding. And this, you know, self-leadership is something that's important for anyone. And the topics that come under there are things like, how do you really discover your zone of genius? How do you understand what your blind spots are? Really build your leadership brand, work on productivity and resilience, and being a good coach to your team. So this is common myth 1. I'm going to now move on to common myth 2, and let's see if we can find people that relate to this one. And here it is. This one says, and honestly, if I could have as I say, a penny for every time I hear this, I'd probably be quite wealthy today. But this is about, I'm just not a people person. If I could get on with my job and everybody would get on with their job, life would be so much easier. And this is something that comes up a lot. So let's see if any of those 2s are coming up, and I see quite a few. Okay, keep them going, keep them coming. I do want to see your responses. And what is the truth? The truth is that the people stuff is your job, regardless of whether you're a people person or not. And this is really where you need to cultivate your team leadership habits in order to be able to do more of the people stuff in a way that works for you and in a way that suits your personality and your approach. So as we said, leadership is about leading people, not just results. And when you're leading people, your top priority is the well-being and success of your people, because then they will want to follow you. Then they will go the extra mile out of that internal motivation rather than out of pressure from a CEO who just drives and pushes. And here we've got so many skills that fall into this bucket, which is really about holding people accountable, having tough conversations in a way that builds relationships rather than destroys them, delegating without micromanaging, and clear communication, or one of those that huge area to focus on and work with. So all of those fall under the bucket of habits that we can really work with for common myth 2. Okay, moving into common myth 3. What is it? So here we go. Let's have a look. And if you relate, once again, just type 3 in the chat. So this is the one that says, prior success guarantees future success. If I stick to the strategies that have worked in the past, if I keep tight controls and take ownership of everything, I'll continue to be successful. So now this is, I'd love to see anybody can relate to this, or if you even know someone, you know, not always, sometimes we can see past the myths, but we might be working with people who feel this way. And this is really the type of thinking that gets people stuck in that leadership gap or the plateau that I spoke about. So here we go. And I see 3s. And of course, there are going to be some people who don't think like this or can't relate to this. And I'm going to stress once again, even if you can't, be aware that there are people around you who think like this. So to try and actually understand this, yeah, so here Sharon says, you can see this, but I don't relate. And that's really important, because you need to be able to see it in the people around you, because then as a leader, you need to be able to work with that myth, with that mindset, and really shift it. Okay, so what is the truth? The truth is that there is a level of success that requires you to do things differently from a leadership standpoint. You've got to trust your people more. You definitely are not an island, and believing that you are keeps you at the plateau. And I think that this is really, I like to think about it a little bit like a computer game. So, you know, if any of you play computer games, or if you have children that play computer games, you know that you have to work through the levels, and you need to collect tools and skills and whatever, kill the little monsters that come along the way. And then you work hard, and then you get to the next level. And in the next level of the game, you don't know what scenario is waiting for you. You don't know what skills you're going to need to collect. You don't know what monsters you're going to have to kill off. So there's a lot of unknowns going into that next level, but you're ready for it and you're ready to go, and it's a game. And actually, it's a little bit similar to our leadership story, because at every point in our career, we hit a level where we all of a sudden don't really know the rules as well as we did before. So everything that we have learned is definitely going to help us, but it's not everything. We need something more. We need something different. We need something uncertain. And that's also a little bit scary. So we need to navigate something different and new. And with this particular myth is where we work on our business leadership habits, which is really about having crystal clarity about our vision and our strategy, taking those tough decisions sometimes that we know are going to move the business forward, but are not always easy. So what does this look like? Here are the 3 habit stacks for extraordinary CEOs, and they really relate to the myths that I've just described. So the first one is all about self-leadership habits, which will make you a confident and self-aware leader, so that when you can lead with presence and gravitas and confidence and clarity, then people want to follow you and people are drawn to follow you, and you create a culture where you're in alignment, you share values, and you're all going for the same things. The second is all about being connected and inspiring, and this is about team leadership habits. So how do you engage with your teams and various stakeholders? And I'm talking about teams, I'm talking about networks as well. It could be the various stakeholders that are in your sphere of influence. How do you connect with them so that you can be inspiring and motivating and actually make sure that the relationships that you build take you further in your business, whether it's your team wanting to go the extra mile or your board being engaged and connected and aligned so that you can all work together towards that common goal. And the third leadership stack is all about courage and clarity. And that relates to our business leadership habits, where we really need to stand in the clarity of our big vision, build the strategy, and make some tough decisions to take us forward. And that's not easy. For me, what I see commonly is that CEOs, if I had to say a theme that comes through in the CEO's work, it's really around decision making, because everything boils down to a decision. And it's not always easy to make a decision. Sometimes it's clear, but often it's not. And you need to be able to really stand in yourself and be connected to your environment to make the right decisions. So those are the 3 habit stacks. And as you may have noticed, I speak a lot about habits. Okay, so what is the whole thing about habits? And for me, this is really important, because when we want to create a shift in our mindset, when we want to start doing things differently and create that shift in our results, if we think of it as habits, then it means that what we're doing is we are creating new neural pathways in our brain for new ways of behaving, which can actually which obviously leads to better results. Now, what our brain does is, as soon as we repeat something, it hardwires it or automates it, so it becomes easier to implement every time. So you don't have to put in a lot of energy every time you're learning a new behavior or a new skill. But the thing with the brain is that it automates everything that's repeated. The brain doesn't make any value judgments about, is this a good habit or a bad habit? Is this something that I want to do or something that I don't want to do? And that's why we have to be very specific and conscious about the habits or behaviors or skills that we're learning, so that we repeat the ones that serve us and take note of the ones that hold us back and try to minimize those. So when I look at leadership, and I think there's so much we can do in terms of up-leveling our leadership and creating shifts in our environment, that we can boil down to the habit. What is the automated way, the easiest way that we can shift something here so that we can really get the results that we want? And when we look at it this way, it becomes practical and becomes easier to implement. So how do we figure out the habits that we want to build, and then how do we make them stick? And that's what I'm going to move into now. So what I'm going to share with you now is the framework that I've created based on my years of working with CEOs, and it really identifies the habit footprint of or the habit roadmap for the CEO to start building in order to build and cultivate the behaviors and the results that they want to see. Now, every behavior or every leadership habit roadmap looks different, because it really depends on your own preferences, style, personality, background, experience, and all of that. But what I found is that those 3 buckets that I've already mentioned are key to everyone. And then the roadmap is tweaked on an individual level when we work with CEOs to make it really specific to the person. But there are certain habits that keep repeating themselves as areas that are really necessary or desired for CEOs to work on or leaders to work on. So I'm going to share those with you today, but understand there isn't a one size fits all here, because as we saw, even with the myths and even with the painful problems, not everybody can relate to everything. We're all different. So we really need to make it match our own unique selves. And that's key here. So let's start with our sweet spot. And our sweet spot here is that we want to be an extraordinary leader or an extraordinary CEO. And we know that to be an extraordinary leader, we need three things. First is we need to be confident, we need to be connected, and we need to be courageous. And when we're confident, connected, and courageous, we can really own it, love it, and go for it. Okay, so how do we do this? First, we look at our first habit stack, which I've spoken about. It's all about expanding our identity with self-leadership habits and building that self-awareness and gravitas and impact in the way that we show up, in the way that we lead. The second habit stack is all about enhancing impact, and that is with team leadership habits. I've spoken about that as well in terms of building relationships, trusting your people, doing all those things that really make your team come together and want to follow you, want to be led by you, and want to go the extra mile for you as well. And then the third is all about elevating results. And that's the business leadership habits that will take your business forward towards achieving the big vision and direction that you've set as CEO. Okay, so what does each of the, what happens when we don't have one of these buckets? So the real idea here is that when you work on your habits and work on these three areas, you never have to feel some of those painful problems that we've spoken about. So if you, for example, just focus on impact and results, you'll end up feeling lost because you don't really have a good, strong, centered sense of identity within your work. If you only focus on results and identity and don't really do the work around your team, you'll end up feeling quite lonely and isolated in your leadership position. And then if you only focus on identity and impact, then and you know, not worry so much about results, then you feel stuck in that loop. And that's when you hit that leadership gap or the plateau where you keep doing similar things, you keep working hard as a team, but you're not really seeing the results that you want to see. Okay, so now I'm going to take you into three typical habits that we see in each of these habit stacks, and I'll run through those quite quickly. So the first one is all about zone of genius. This is really about understanding what are your key talents that really make you stand out, that make you unique as a leader and help you to build your leadership brand. The second is about growth mindset and feedback. And we've spoken about growth mindset, which is all about learning and growing, trying new things, and feedback, getting the feedback from your environment to really know where you need to improve. The third is about bounce back ability, which is productivity, resilience, dealing with challenges and things like that. Okay, then moving into enhancing impact. Here we have, it's all about building trust, sharing leadership, not, you know, delegating but not micromanaging, bringing your team in and not being alone. Clear communication is absolutely key here. And of course, resolving conflict. And there's some skills that you really need to learn and develop in that area. And I will just say here that I think it's not about avoiding conflict. It's actually sometimes you want to encourage healthy, good conflict, because that brings a diversity of thinking and a diversity of experience, which is really important in order to keep that level of growth and keep going forward. Then on our business leadership habits, we have having a clear vision and strategy, absolutely critical. Understanding where your career is going and what your legacy is. Are you building leaders for the future? And then making tough decisions. As I said, this is one of the key competencies or key parts of the job of being a CEO and a leader. So now we've looked at all of this framework, which I know is a lot of information. And the real question is, how do we identify the leaders that we need? How do we create the leadership footprint or the leadership habit footprint that will help us to really grow in the areas that we need to grow in? And there are four things that I want you to keep in mind here. The first one is that you really need to go deep to understand the key habits that hold you back and the mindset that is often the root issue. Number two is about getting practical. You need to get into action. You need to know what you need to do to change your habits. So after you dig deep and you get insights and understanding, you want to create some action around that. What do we do to build new and better habits? And then, of course, keep yourself accountable. You cannot go it alone. You need to engage the people around you to ensure that you're hardwiring your new habits. And of course, working with a coach here is really optimal, and get feedback. I'm a strong believer in getting feedback from your environment, because as CEOs and as leaders, we often do not have people around us who are willing to be, or who can be, completely honest with us. So get feedback from those who are not afraid to tell you what they are seeing, what they are noticing. Get objective and honest feedback about your areas of strength and weaknesses, and that's what will help you to grow. Now, I will say that when we work with our CEOs on these capabilities and on their leadership habit footprint, we do this either one-on-one, where it really helps you to dig deep, look inside, and have your own unique footprint and your own, special circumstances taken into account. And we also do this in groups for, the next layer of leadership, where you can work together, and then the insights that you get from each other working in a group is also absolutely phenomenal. But this is something that really requires quite a deep look inside, action, accountability, and feedback to also understand your progress. And now, making habits stick. This is also one of my favorite topics. There are 4 steps. So once you've chosen your habits and you know which habits you want to develop, there are 4 steps to really making them stick. And the first one is creating a trigger or something that you can link it to. So I'm going to use my example of, I remember I said I'm not a sporty person at all. But the truth is that since I climbed Kilimanjaro, and because of the training that I had to do for it, I've become a runner, and I've actually run a half marathon since, which for me is just really quite an achievement. So how did I do this? For me, doing exercise is tough. It's always going to be challenging. It's always challenging to get out the door and start running. But once I do it, I'm actually happy. So I link it to an activity. So for example, I know that I can't run after supper. So I know that if I want to eat supper, I have to go run. So it's kind of a pre-link. Or another link that I do is that all I say to myself is just get dressed, put on your running clothes, but don't run. Don't worry, just put on your running clothes. And I know that that creates the link. Once I've got the running clothes on, I'm going to go out and go for that run. The second one is keep the steps small, break it down into tiny steps. So in the beginning, all I say to myself is just run down the block, run around the block. Don't think of 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, just do a short run, just get out there, and that's enough. Once I did that, I built up, and of course I ran further and further. But if you break it down into small steps, then it's much easier to see that. Exactly like when I was in Kilimanjaro and I thought of the summit and how exhausted I was, I couldn't really do it. But when all I had to think about was one more step, that made it a lot easier for me to actually go and do it. And then I'm a big fan of tracking it. So with my running, I've got an app. So my app counts for me, obviously my pace and my distance, but it also counts for me how many kilometers I do in a year. And I've got this goal that I like to do 1,000 kilometers in a year. So when I see those numbers climbing and I start figuring out and I know I'm tracking, then I'm really happy, and it helps me with the consistency. There is the 4-21 rule that I wanted to mention. So after 4 times of doing something, your neural pathways are already created and getting stronger. And after 21 times of doing it, that's the general convention, your behavior is hardwired and automated. So all you have to think of is first 4, just get 4 done, then move on to the 21, and then you'll have it a much easier time of keeping consistent. And then the final one is reward yourself. And I go back to my running example, and that is that after a run, when I'm boiling, I like to have like an ice lolly or an ice cream, whatever I feel is a good treat. And that's what I do. That's how I reward myself after a run. So make it worth your while. Make it exciting to do that habit, to make it work for you. So that's about making habits stick. And I wanted to take one example of a habit that I think is just so important for leaders, CEOs, anyone in a leadership position, and that is the habit of getting into conversation. And this is something really important. So now I just want to point out here that we need to get specific. So saying get into conversation is not good enough for creating a habit because it's too broad, it's too big. So how do we break it down? I'm a firm believer that communication is the basis for everything. Conversation is a skill that we need to learn, and it's got a lot of parts. So I'll just give you a couple of examples of habits that I've worked with my CEO clients that have really been successful in terms of starting to change our behaviors around that, or our habits around that. And one is a question like, what do you think? So often as CEOs, as leaders, the person who knows, the person who leads, we feel like we need to have all the answers. We feel like we need to give the answers, even if we know them. And the truth is, what our responsibility is to help people think better, to help them develop their thinking, set them on a path so that they don't have to come and ask you the question every time a challenge comes up. So if you can, for just a while, challenge yourself to answer a question, well, what do you think? And in a way that feels natural to you, not in a way that just throws the ball back, but you know, you can even say, have you been thinking about this? What have you come up with so far? Some version of that can really help change the mindset and the neural pathways for the person you're speaking to. That's a really good habit to begin with. Another favorite question that I have is, how can I help you? If a leader, if someone comes to you with a question, how can I help you here? What would be the best way for me to help you? Again, you're making them think about exactly what it is that they need. Those are two little habits that you can start to think about and doing things differently. Another one is listening. Also one of my favorite topics. I had a client who really struggled with listening. He said, I just don't know what to do. I know I need to listen, but I just want to talk and it just comes out. So I said to him, listen, here, I've got the perfect tip for you to begin to listen better. And he said, what's that? And I said, just keep your mouth closed. And it can be as simple as that. Just keep your mouth closed. You want to say something, close your mouth. That's a link and a trigger. And just allow more people to talk and really listen to what they're saying. And another favorite is that I often see people getting into these 8 hours and 30 email conversations for something that could have been sorted out in 30 seconds. Can you relate to that? Just type a 1 if you can. Because we sometimes think it's so much easier to just pop out an email, but then with a back and forth and you just wanted this thing sorted out. You could have done it in 30 seconds by picking up the phone. Pick up the phone, have the conversation, make it easy and connect. And I think that's really the most important habit of leaders. So I've got a giveaway today. I have recently launched my second book, which is Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders. And I would love to give a copy away. So if anybody has got a birthday today, do we have anyone in the audience? Just type yes in the comments and let's see who can, anyone with a birthday today. I'd love to make sure that you get a copy of my book. We'll take your details. Ignatius, is it your birthday? 2nd of June. Great. Is there anyone else? oh, hold on a sec. Ignatius saying no. Oh, I'm confused, guys. Okay. Why did you just write yes or it's my birthday in the comments? Okay, we've got, okay. Right, sister's birthday, Sunday. Okay, we don't have anyone on the 2nd of June. Anyone either 1st of June or 3rd of June? No. Okay, 28th of May. Right, so let's see. Let's take the first week of June or the last week of May. First week of June or last week of May, and we'll take the closest person. 12th May. Okay, we've got 30th of May is closer, and 4th of June. Okay, 30th of May and 4th of June each get a book from me. So we have got Leon Tehran and Sharon Carson. There we go. You both got books from me. Congratulations. Please just make contact with me. You're welcome to connect. All of you, please do connect with me on LinkedIn. Always, as I said, I answer emails. Ask me your questions and I'll be happy to answer. I'll stay on for Q&A. There's also a free sample of my book if you just go to this link and you can download your own free sample or purchase a copy on Amazon. And I'd like to end with this quote from Aristotle, and it goes like this. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And I have my own tweak on this quote, and I say leadership then is not an act, but a habit. So let's make it a habit. Let's create better leaders in the world, because I believe that when we own our own leadership, we really change our environment, and that can only change the world for the better. Thank you so much for hosting me today, and I will be delighted to open the conversation and answer any questions that you may have, or hear some of your comments and feedback. I'd love to hear some of your takeaways. So if you're happy to type into the chat, thank you for your participation. I loved it. Type into the chat. What are you taking away from today's session? I'm always excited to hear that. And Vicky, I'm going to hand over to you.
Cool. Thank you, Daphne. That was amazing. I'm gonna put my
Thank you.
video on so you can see me, and let's go have a look, and congratulations to those who won the
Yes.
book. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So I'm just going to open up the Q&A so I can just see what we have in store already. But maybe just to get us going, Daphne, while I'm looking at some of the questions that are coming through, is, you mentioned under Ben's first lesson about, creating this kind of habit roadmap and how it helped him. Maybe you can give us some practical examples of, what is this habit roadmap, or what kind of things would you, and examples of stuff that we would change. Maybe we start off with that while I look through the questions.
Sure. So in Ben's example, it was a delight to work with him because he was an excited, motivated leader who really wanted to take his business to the next level. But he came, as I said, from an expert background. So he was an actuary, he really, really knew his stuff. But on the leadership stuff, emotional intelligence stuff, that was a little bit challenging for him. So we really had to we actually started with the team leadership habits in his case. And something I didn't mention is that what I've done with my models, I've turned things around a little bit, because what happens is we often want to start with the results. We want to see the wins that will get us the results and move us forward. And we focus on that, but it holds us back, because when we focus on our identity, which is where we start with, and our team, we know that that's just going to create leverage for even better results. So with Ben, we started working on his team things. There were some simple things that we put in that helped him to structure his thinking and the way that he looked at his team, how he was, using each team member's strengths to their best ability. So I'll give an example. He was he was doing absolutely everything from the connection call to creating a lead, to the sales call, to the follow-up. So I actually just asked him a simple question. Is there anyone in your team that you can see has the potential? Because actually they were a team of experts, you can imagine. But I said to him, can you identify the different areas of strength of your team members? And let's look at each one and see if we can find someone who has potential to take on some of the sales calls and connections. And then let's bring him up, give him some training and see if he can take it on. And that was life-changing for him, because he identified one person in his team, Sizwe, and Sizwe just loved the opportunity, took it with both hands, and he just started rolling with starting to generate leads and do those initial calls. And for Ben, it all of a sudden just took a huge weight off his shoulders and he felt supported. So that was just a simple tweak. And there were so many of those little things along the way that we just dug into and found, where can we tweak to really get a difference in results?
Thank you. So Sharon, just to answer your question on the Q&A, yes, you will get a copy of the slides. We will send everyone the PDF copy of the slides when we send you an email, as well as the links that Daphne mentioned during her presentation to the mindset, and as well to the book. So you will get all of that, and it also will be on our website. So just to answer that question. So Amanda has got a question. I assume CEOs who are coming from a finance background will feel lonely at the top more than those who are from an HR background. What's your views on that?
Yeah, so I think you're highlighting actually an important area, which is that shift, which is again part of that leadership gap, but the shift from expert to leader. It's the technical expertise, the technical abilities and talents, to actually working with people. And yes, I hate putting people in boxes, because you get CFOs that, are okay, but I do find that, CFOs, actuaries, engineers do struggle with those leadership capabilities. So it really is about, here's what I say, and I also want to add an element into that for a minute as well. It's like the introverted leader. So I think people who prefer to focus on their work, do the stuff that brings them joy, don't love all the conversation interaction, don't feel that they have the personality or charisma to really be out there. But for me, it's about making it work for you. And this is where I talk about digging deep. Understand who you are. You don't have to be this loud, passionate, energized, charismatic person. You can be quiet. There's a quiet leadership. But when you connected with yourself, you know who you are and you know what your unique talents and strengths are. And this is something that we work on with a zone of genius. Then you can start building on those and doing it in the way that's right for you. Yes, it's going to be a stretch. Yes, it's going to be out of your comfort zone, but I think that's what leadership is all about. It's about stretching yourself. And we see these talented people who are happy to stretch themselves on their knowledge and expertise. You can do that on the more personal attributes as well. And that's really what's going to take you to the next level. So definitely can be worked on.
Thank you. So Nanda wants to know, to what extent do the board, and he specifically mentions a RIM and NOM committee, consider habits 1 and 2 when appointing their leaders, instead of focusing on a leader that only has a strong focus on habit 3, which is results. And maybe there you can link in, Daphne, is, what's some tips for our board members in here,
Yes.
when considering how to, work with their CEO and their leaders and picking leaders?
Awesome question. I love it, because I think the board has such an important role here, because I know often the board's focus is on growth and results and metrics and all of those. And of course, those are important. I'm not for 1 second saying that you don't need to focus on those. But I think the board members have a huge opportunity here to look at the whole picture. And really, CEOs are struggling. So when I spoke about the painful problems and the problem of being lonely at the top, they're struggling. They know, imposter syndrome. We all know what that's like. Like, we feel out of our depths. We're doing our best, but we don't always know that we're doing the right thing. And what I would love to see is the board actually taking more of a mentoring role on that level as well. So when you even hiring or looking at where your CEOs need support, if it's possible to do it in a sensitive way. I mean, I would even say, maybe if you can engage one-on-one, pick up the phone, have a lunch together, and see if you can give some feedback about what you're seeing, because you have that advantage of objective perspective to be able to give some feedback, help them grow through their role, because it's so important. And I am going to say, working with a coach, in my opinion, is critical for a CEO. And that kind of suggestion can come from the board. And that is something that can be put together when you're hiring. So here's something that I see as well. New CEO comes into the role. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to take on. They want to make an impact, first 100 days and all of that. But this is when they need a coach. If you can give them a coach right at the beginning of their journey in their new role, you're going to set them up for success. What I often see is that 6 months into the role, a year into the role, the struggles start surfacing, the challenges start surfacing, and becomes a bit too big. And that's when they approach coach to work with. And I say, if you can get that earlier on with the onboarding, with the hiring process, then you'll have a great support structure for your CEOs to really, really be set up for success.
Thanks, Daphne. And I think this relates, and you've answered William's question, which was, how do you suggest breaking the cycle of bias towards hiring the best technical expert rather than a person that would be suited for leadership? So I think you kind of covered that.
Awareness. You have to look at the whole picture. So that's exactly what I say, that framework with the buckets of self-leadership habits, team leadership habits, and business leadership habits. Yes, the business leadership habits are the results, and that's the obvious place to look. But look at, who is this person? And I know they go through a variety of a barrage of assessments before they get hired. Look at that. See that there's a cultural fit. Ask about the culture that the CEO wants to create. Ask questions about how they build a team. Look at those areas and make that part of the hiring process. It's absolutely critical. And I will say, for the CEOs, in terms of their hiring process for their teams, critical. Don't fall into the trap of hiring people who are similar to you, who you can relate to because you have that expertise and shared knowledge. Look for people who know more than you. Be brave, look for people who know more than you, who have a different way of thinking, because that's how you can, as I said, bring in that diversity.
Great. I see Namudi and Paco's got your hands up. If you've got questions, just keep it there and I will come to you shortly. If anyone else would like to ask a question live, you can raise your hand. And I'll start going through those lists now. So few more questions here as well. And I think a lot of people actually asked about them. Sorry?
I see one here from Eugene that's interesting. How do you assess the mindset in an interview? Yeah, so I like that. I like that, already starting to think, okay, how do we assess a fixed or growth mindset in an interview? So what I want to say here is that, firstly, let's not use these assessments to box people, because the key thing here is, are people willing to learn? Are they willing to get feedback and learn and grow from it? So that's key. But a growth mindset usually indicates that. What I would suggest, Eugene, is go get that mindset assessment, do the quiz, because what it is, it's a downloadable PDF. So you'll have all those questions with you. And what those questions do is they point to specific scenarios and ask you how you approach it. You can use those questions in an interview and start to get an indication of how, you know, the candidate would approach certain situations. So that will give you some indication. So do the assessment and let me know how it goes.
Perfect. So Pumi has a nice practical question. Maybe I shouldn't have actually said your name. Is our CEO does all the right things, but doesn't come across authentic. She's the CEO and she's suggested coaching, but wants to know, you know, how can she help, you know, their CEO and give more constructive feedback regularly? So that's a nice practical question.
Yes. So I think really, really important to, this is a little bit of a difficult one because she seems to be talking the talk, doing the right things, but it doesn't seem to be coming from inside. So I think this is worth a little bit of a conversation. Definitely, I would suggest offering the opportunity to work with a coach. But if we're talking about a board member here to CEO, then actually a question of try to understand what's in the CEO's mindset. What is she thinking? What are her true concerns and worries? And here, when I work with CEOs, I always stress the importance of being authentic. When you say something and it doesn't come from inside, or you don't really mean it, or you're doing it because you think you have to, people can tell. The way to combat that is to really start to get to know the person, to build a relationship. So it's a little bit of a more lengthy process because you can't go to someone and say, listen, I can see you saying the right things, but it doesn't sound authentic to me. The way to get there is to really build the relationship, get to know the person. And here I say, know them beyond their role, know who they are as a human being. Do they have a family? Do they have hobbies? What do they like to do on weekends? Have they been on holiday recently? What are they struggling with? We've all been through a crazy, crazy year. You know, talk about that. What has that challenge been like for you? Where has it been really hard? And key thing is to share some from yourself. So I actually had a conversation with a CEO that I'm coaching the other day, and he said to me, what opened or kind of broke the ice with one of his direct reports that was a little bit reserved was when he shared a story about his own vulnerability around, you know, he was having a bit of a challenge with his board about something, and he shared the story with his direct report, and then she opened up so much more easily and they had a meaningful conversation. So there's a lot of elements here. It's about get to know the person, build the relationship, share some of your own challenges, show that you're a human being and that it's okay to struggle, it's okay to not know everything. And through that, hopefully you'll come to a place where that CEO builds the capacity to be authentic, and not that everything has to look good and that she needs to keep it all together and everything and have all the answers.
Thank you. We are running a little bit over time at 10, so but if you don't mind, if we can answer a few more, there's quite a lot of questions here.
I love it. I love the conversation. Thank you. Keep them coming.
Paku, I've enabled your talk functionality, and Namudi, if you can just unmute your mic as well, you can then ask your question after Paku.
I would like to say people who love their professions very much are the ones who actually are introverts. When you have your profession, you have to open up. And as you open up also for reciprocity. You learn from others. Like, for instance, the example that I have is that having an accounting background, I used reconciliation and I likened it to people who disagree and say, find the factors of disagreement, and then you meet people together. Thank you very much.
I love that, Paku. Thanks so much for bringing it on. I actually did a strategy session a couple of weeks ago with a CEO, and we got to such amazing alignment around the vision and the strategy that we want to take forward. And the CEO stood up at the end of the day with his team, and he said to me, he said to everyone, I love this alignment. I love what's happened in the room, but I want to hear where you disagree. It's not always about alignment. It's about hearing where the points of contention are so that we can have that conversation and debate and conflict and really put that on the table as well. So Paku, totally love what you've just brought into the room. Thank you.
There's so many questions, Daphne, and each one is, you know, so different. Michelle wants to know, how would you turn around the mindset of people with a damaging negative attitude towards, the company because of personal clashes between maybe themselves and management or even the board? How do you change that?
Yeah, it's really, it's so important and something that happens really often. And here it's about listening. It's about having the conversation, really bringing the different parties together and hearing them out. And here's maybe another tip that I often also say to my CEOs is that sometimes we have an emotional situation and our natural tendency is to deal with it in a rational way. And I just laugh at that, because the first thing you've got to do with an emotional situation, when someone's feeling unvalued, unheard, conflict of values, whatever it is, you need to hear them, listen, acknowledge their feelings, and only then can you move to the rational approach. What happens usually, someone's feeling disgruntled and we give all the reasons why they shouldn't be, or all the evidence why it's not like that. That does not work. The rational brain does not talk to the emotional brain. The emotional brain talks to the emotional brain. When you create a connection on an emotional level, only then can you move to that rational conversation. And what happens is all too often, we dive into the rational, we have all the reasons and the explanations, but those are falling on deaf ears. So in a situation like that, very sensitive, but you've got to give space for every party to have their say, to have themselves heard, to have their emotions acknowledged. Doesn't mean you have to agree. Acknowledging emotion doesn't mean that you are condoning or agreeing, but you're hearing. And when you do that on a deep level, then you can move into a conversation that is really much more empowering.
So Derek's got a specific question around, what are your thoughts about creating a habit of constantly challenging your brain and hardwiring change in order to grow versus hardwiring routine? And that's doing the same things over and over.
Yeah. So great. I love that. I love the idea of, so this is something I really connect to, is the idea of creating a habit about anything that we want to develop. So yes, a habit around accepting change, encouraging change, challenging yourself to think differently. Another thing that I often talk about is that when we look at we are bombarded with information at this era that we're living in, right? But what happens is that the minute we show interest in a certain line of thinking, that is the information that keeps coming back at us. So it actually creates a much more fixed way of thinking, because whether you search on Google, LinkedIn, Twitter, your feed is going to give you the more of the same of what you are reading or thinking about. So what we actually have to do is create a habit around looking for other opinions. If you really want to develop a holistic approach, you need to go and search those opinions that are different to yours. Doesn't mean that you're going to agree with them, but just to challenge your thinking in that way. And I think that's a good habit. Where I'm going to put in a caveat is that I don't like black and white thinking, because I do think that sometimes routines are great. Sometimes we need routines, For example, when it comes to a safety situation, there's a very specific way that you need to handle it, right? A paramedic or, a fire in the building. There's a way and a protocol, and you have to follow the protocol. And that's not a place where you start challenging yourself with doing things differently, right? This is where you want to follow the protocol and follow the routine. So always have flexibility around that way of thinking as well.
All right, so we're definitely over time, but I'm going to ask two more questions, and maybe what we can do is we'll send you the questions, Daphne, and we can always, you will have people's details. So two related questions, I think, one from Jennifer and one from Palesa. So Jennifer specifically wanting to know, given the current situation environment that we're all working in, how do we get CEOs to demonstrate more empathy as a value, particularly during these times where employees may feel vulnerable, etc.? And are these so-called soft skills not much more required now, I guess more than ever? And then linked to that, Palesa wants to know, how does a CEO deal with different wavelengths with his or her executives, where they differ in approaches and responding to, staff and human rights and these type of things being considered and empathetic. So two different views of the perspective, where the CEO is being empathetic and where the CEO isn't. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. So firstly, I want to say that in these times, empathy has been the key quality that CEOs have to, and leaders have to really cultivate and work on, even if it doesn't come naturally. And this is an area of challenge for many, many CEOs, because as I said, the focus and the mindset is on, we need to get results, we need to work, there's a lot of work. I don't have time for conversations about like, how do you feel, and all that, but it's critical. The key, as I said, the key leadership role is to ensure the well-being and success of your people, because it starts with, if your people are feeling good, if they're feeling cared for, they will go to the end of the earth to make things happen, because it also makes them feel good. So that's really, really important and a critical skill for these days as well, and definitely something that can be built with habits and conscious awareness. Okay, and then the second question was, sorry, just remind me.
So the one was from where the CEO and the executives don't really gel well.
Yes.
You know, either where the execs are being more empathetic or considerate and the CEO isn't, or where the CEO is, and you know, I guess where there's clashes between the C-suite.
Yeah, I think this is about having those conversations. So whoever is having the observation that something is not gelling, or there's a misalignment of values or approach, we need to have that conversation. And here is where a company culture really comes into the fore, right? It begins with your values, with your purpose, with what you want to do in this world as a business beyond the profits and the metrics. So do you have a clear identity and culture in the business? And then I think it's really important to hold people accountable to the culture. So this is something, again, that we do see, unfortunately, where the focus is on deliverables, getting the results. So you forgo some culture misalignment. Oh, okay, don't worry, he's such a good performer. Let's just leave it. Just understand that's how he is. We cannot forgive these kind of missteps, because that's what makes your culture go awry. And you really, you know, I think critical, and where we're going into the future and with the year that we've had, is building a culture that makes people feel cared for, valued, together with high standards of excellence and all of that. So it really begins with conversation, defining the culture, identifying what's important, and being able to hold each other accountable, and as an executive team when we are out of step.
Thank you. And then the last one is a bit of the opposite. So Yang wants to know, have you looked into CEOs who have all the habits and the traits, but you know, never or didn't end up a great CEO, or even, you know, potentially being appointed as one? I think even we can relate to that. And she's wondering, you know, what are the habits that kill a great leader, or you know, getting you even to that position?
Yes. And here I do see this happen, where you've got a wonderful, talented CEO who cares about his people or her people. So, you know, really, really there. But what's missing there is often that level of PR, which I call it PR for themselves, which is a really difficult thing. So if you take an example of someone who's more introverted, doesn't love talking about themselves, just want to get on with the work, loves their work, is passionate about their people, you get those people. But if they don't talk about what they're doing, if they don't bring people in to their mission and vision and how they're going about things, they do land up selling themselves short. So there is a way to do it in a way that's not icky, because I know that for a lot of people feels a little bit icky. I don't want to go and toot my own horn and just talk about all the, because we know those leaders as well, right? We know the leaders who constantly talking about what they've done. It's all I. So it's finding that balance and building habits around how do you show your work to people around you so that you can also be valued and appreciated. Humility is great, and hold on to that quality, but also put your work out into the world, because that's what people need to see. And you are changing people's lives. You are making a difference. So if you can bring that in a way that works for you, and that's about cultivating habits around how do you show your work.
Thank you, Daphne, so much. And thank you so much for staying on and continuing to answer some of the questions. And I'm sorry if I didn't get to everybody's questions. There's quite a lot still in the Q&A chat, and hopefully maybe we can get to them after the session. And you're more than welcome. You'll see on your screen Daphne's links to contact her via LinkedIn as well as on our website. So please do get in touch. And Daphne, from the chat group, if I'm looking at some of the comments, one specifically, listening to Daphne and her energy creates this never quit and relate better with others vibe. Thank you so much for the session. Needed this desperately during this pandemic. So there is tons of comments like this, Daphne, in the chat group of how everyone has enjoyed the session, especially your energy and some of the thoughts and views that you've brought this morning. So thank you very much. Tefo, yes, the recording of the session will be available. We will send it to everyone that is attending, and it will be on our YouTube channel and the website. So you'll definitely be able to get hold of the recording and share it, I think, with the rest of your teams, as well as others that are in leadership roles. I think it helps anyone in a leadership role, what you've shared with us this morning. So thank you so much. And we look forward to hopefully having you again.
Thank you so much, Vicky. Loved our time together. And I've said before, I answer every email. So if something's sticking with you or some question that you want to check out, reach out. I will answer. We can connect on social as well, LinkedIn or whatever. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And please, everyone, do fill out our satisfaction survey and let us know what else you'd like us to talk about on our Wednesday sessions. We will be changing up our programming in the next couple of weeks, and you will get an email about how we're going to be changing our boardroom bites at 9. It's not going to be every week, but we're going to have one once a month. So we'll be focusing on really key, grabbing topics as well as we go forward. So just look out for those changes and some of the other webinars and programs we're going to be implementing at the IID, such as more networking ability and speaking to experts as well. So there's some really exciting changes coming along. Until then, I will see you all again next week. Enjoy the weekend, and please do get in touch with Daphne.